You're listening to Common Sense and Beer, where we talk about heavy-hitting topics with a beer in hand. I'm your host, Kyle. Co-host here is
Zach.
And we have a special guest with us today.
I'm Colton.
Colton?
Yeah.
Hey, Colton.
Well, you also got Joey here.
Well, we always have
we
Joey
always
here.
have Joey.
Pulling up stuff, clicking the buttons, yelling at us whenever we need to be yelled
Yeah,
at.
you never introduce him.
We
It's a
sure
sad
don't.
life he lives back there.
We tried, and then, he said he had words about us bringing him on one time, and we were like, okay, fine. I guess we won't do that anymore. So
Well,
we'll just let you be incognito.
Well, he's really good at pulling stuff up when we're talking. So we've
True.
called him out on a couple
Yeah.
times. So
It is handy.
We
It
gotta
is
bring him
handy
in.
having him.
extremely handy. So thank you, Joey.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. You're always great.
So, well, today, going on with our theme of controversial topics, we're going to cover legalizing cannabis, recreational
marijuana.
Yeah, recreational. We'll probably get into talks about medicinal use. But I think I actually might have an opposing view. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm interested to see what you guys think. What are you guys' so Colton, Kyle, what are you guys' thoughts on legalizing marijuana? Pros, cons?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll go first. Coming into the political arena pretty young, I guess Ron Paul brought me in. So going along with his hardline approach of just legalizing everything and just kind of letting it all be up to personal responsibility was my first kind of, intro into it all, into the thought processes of it all. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. A lot of people think he's obviously nuts for that thought. And yeah, I can get it too, because, you don't want a bunch of people out there doing hard drugs. I'd assume that would probably just be a bad cultural environment.
Speak for yourself. No.
So today I probably view it more as I view drugs on a scale. I feel like there's no reason why it's Schedule 1 marijuana. I feel it's a plant. It grows pretty natural.
At this point, I'd consider alcohol worse than marijuana, or just as.
I would 100% agree with that. Because I've always told people it's like, I would rather just do that than get all drunk, because, at least that'll wear off and you don't have to worry about getting, violently angry or driving driving all crazy. Because as much as people say it's like, well, driving under the influence, it's like, look, those people are a lot more cautious than you would think. Okay, they are paranoid. Yeah. They are paranoid that a cop is going to pull them over. They're paranoid about getting into an accident, so they're probably driving a little slower. They're probably, in turn, just being a little safer, like just because of their paranoia. So, an alcoholic, when you're drunk, obviously you get that false confidence that I would say marijuana does not provide.
Well, I'll tell you, when I've been drinking, and there's usually a very small line for me. Usually when I say I'm good to drive, I'm good to drive. Notably, there's no way that I would fail a breathalyzer or a field sobriety test, and I'm totally fine to drive. But there have been times where I'm like, man, I'm right on the edge, and I do get paranoid. So I've never been to the point where I'm like, oh, screw it. Yeah, I'm just getting myself home.
Yeah, I'm blacked out. Where's my keys?
Right?
Yeah, I've never driven to that point. I've been to that point, but I've never driven to that point.
That's good.
Sure. And so,
yeah, I'm always wondering, like, after I do all that, where's the nearest school? Especially when it's 11 a.m.
Nearest school zone to drive through.
Yeah.
This will be good.
Yeah, but
really test my skill.
Yeah. Well, here's my thought on it too. Is, well, with you brought something up with being high versus drunk driving. I've only been high once, maybe twice, and actually no, I've only been high once. And the thing that I actually have to, because I usually will say, I'll usually say, okay, I think that weed is much more intense than alcohol. But that being said, the one time that I was high, one, I was already kind of drunk. Yeah. So that didn't help. But two, I will say that it's different. It's just because it's different doesn't necessarily make it, way more intense. It was just different.
Right.
And so I think there's a little bit of that too with people that maybe haven't used cannabis or anything. It is different.
There's very much so, I'd say, like an initial time. Obviously, if you were drunk, all I'd say at that point it did for you was an amplifier. So it would have taken the drunk and pushed you as if you had a couple more beers. Probably pushed you into that nauseous zone.
That's
give you the
usually where it puts
spins.
me.
That would make sense.
So, I mean, it's always kind of like that amplifier. I mean, if you're doing both, look, you're partying, right?
Yeah.
You probably should just be in somewhere that's safe and not be driving
And just
anyways.
be
Right.
planning to stay home.
Or
Right.
yeah, exactly. Planning to stay home, planning to stay over at the party or whatever, or having
Yeah.
to drive a safe driver home. You know?
And that's where the personal responsibility comes in. You know, you should be
Right.
regardless of if you're high or drunk or whatever. You know, there is a level of personal responsibility that you yourself you have to take accountability for. You're responsible for not putting yourself or others in danger.
I would say that's like the responsibility.
Right. Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like you are responsible for your safety and those you bring with you when you're doing this.
Yep. No, 100%. And yeah, it's just an amplifying case. You know, you probably want everyone to be okay with it, know that what's going
Yeah.
on. But
Yeah, don't sneak something into
yeah, no,
somebody's.
you know,
Yeah.
that's kind of messed up.
Yep.
Especially someone who's driving. You don't want your driver to be all screwed up.
No.
What's the matter? Nightmare.
Nightmare.
So
I'm fine.
So yeah, right. So what do you think? So do you think legalizing marijuana for just medicinal purposes or recreational purposes? I get from what I gather of you just saying, you were thinking that alcohol is probably worse, so you'd be for legalization federally legalization of
no,
cannabis.
100%. Yeah, I think it'd be better if it's scheduled, just taken off and made federally. And like a lot of other things, I think it should just be left up to the states. I mean, if a state legislature, whatever, doesn't want to do it, it is what it is. But it shouldn't, at a federal level, I think it's almost like overreach,
Nanny
Okay.
in my
state,
opinion.
nanny state thing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, you're right,
yeah.
exactly.
By federally, I just mean all the states should adopt it. You think, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see why not. And especially if once we get into some more of the medical topics, I mean, it does nothing but help people. And I've heard some great stories about people that get put on it as a prescription.
Yeah.
You know, horrible cancer cases and just the positivity that's allowed them to have. They live a lot longer. You know, it kind of keeps them in that state of mind that, you know, I don't want to say puts them okay with death, but I mean, it puts a lot of other things into perspective.
Helps ease pain.
Helps ease the pain.
As opposed to loading somebody down with opioids.
Oh, exactly.
Does it now?
Right.
Let me ask you this, because I have extremely limited knowledge on an actual high of some sort. But does it actually take away the pain like an opioid would, or does it just make you not worry about it as much? And maybe that would be a better question for a medical person, but I don't know. But
There's probably chemistry involved because our brains have the what is it? The cannabinoid.
They do activate those
receptors.
receptors, which in turn will reduce the amount of pain that you're feeling. It
Okay.
can help relax you. A lot of different benefits to it. People that are
Okay.
anxious.
Yeah, anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah, people that are having like eating disorders. That's a big prescription or medical cause.
I do know. I've seen several videos and short documentaries out there about, people with Parkinson's who have a very bad shake, or I forget what they call it, tremors.
Sure.
It helps that calm down by a lot. I've seen that. I've seen other medicinal uses for it that people really find some relief with cannabis. That being said, let me ask you this then. So I've talked to people who have experimented with a lot of other drugs, harder than cannabis, obviously. And, I ask them about the gateway thought, the gateway drug.
Gateway drug. Yeah, I like this propaganda term.
Now, a lot. Well, so here's the thing. I hear a lot of people that are older than us. They talk about marijuana being the gateway drug. I don't have any thoughts on this really. I'm just interested in your opinion. But do you think that it is considered a gateway drug?
Well, Colton, what do you think?
I think that gets misconstrued a lot because if somebody does get into harder drug use, it's more likely that they probably started somewhere smaller. But I think like maybe smoking marijuana or, trying cocaine with their friends at a bar or something, I don't know that you can necessarily use that as a contributor to, it's a stepping stone. It leads to this. It's like, well, you could just as vehemently argue that drinking alcohol will lead you to go down that path, and then the next path, and then the next path. You know, any drug that you're intaking
That alters your state of
that
mind.
alters your state of mind could potentially lead you down a farther, deeper, darker path with harder drugs. But once again, I think that a lot of that comes down to self-control and
Yeah.
knowing what you want to be and what you want to do.
Right.
I've taken harder drugs, and by hard drugs, I mean I've done cocaine and acid before. Only one time each, but it was just more so like an experimental thing. Like I wanted to see what it did. And I absolutely hated being on cocaine because I felt like I was in panic mode the entire time I was on it. And I was like, I just want this to stop. And acid wasn't bad, but once again, I could tell I was impaired, you know, but it was it was a very great visual experience. And I was with a great group of friends, and we were just out in Joshua Tree National Park. Safe. We weren't like driving around or nothing, you know what I mean? We were keeping to ourselves, and we just enjoyed it, and it was done, and it was like, all right, now I know what it's like. Done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't need to do that again.
Yeah, I'd say the experience with because there's definitely a split on how I view the drugs. You know, as far as levels like hard drugs, I would push like heroin. I would put cocaine in that camp. It's just a highly addictive thing. I think cocaine's one of those things that the first time you do it, you'll never reach that level again, and that's kind of what it's designed to. That's the hook, and it gets you. So you know, like there's all these drugs. The problem. And I mean, we kind of keep referring to the personal responsibility and just, you know, being able to have self-control, because I mean, a lot of these things being so addictive, anybody that's a little weaker of mind, they're just going to be destroyed by these things. They're going to take advantage of them, and they're going to change who these people are. So, I mean, it does come down to that. I don't think making something legal or illegal, though, it changes any of that.
People still get their hands on it.
They're going to get their hands on it.
You're right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the odds are, too, when you make it harder for someone to get access to something that they're going to get, odds are of it being cut with something like fentanyl, which is obviously a huge crisis right now, or some sort of harder painkiller that, you know, ends up now they overdose because they're doing something they weren't expecting to do. You know, and those unfortunate circumstances happen quite often. So it's a sad case, but like I said, it's not, legislature's not going to do anything for it.
Well, I heard a very interesting argument one time that I was having this conversation with somebody, and it was very interesting. It was actually, anyway, I'll say this. So when we talked about cannabis being kind of a gateway drug, they said that it was for them, but they think that the reason it was such a gateway drug is because it's illegal. Marijuana was illegal at the time, and so they equated the marijuana to something illegal, rebellious, whatever. And so they started ramping it up a little by little.
Cascaded.
Right.
Yeah, because
And so-
this is illegal, but it wasn't so bad.
Right.
You know what they're saying, this is illegal. Well, what's it actually do? And then
It can't be that bad.
Right.
it can't be that
Well-
bad. I mean, this wasn't.
And right now, see, and this is, I'm kind of thinking through this as we're talking about it. Right now, we have a line between alcohol and marijuana. Well, in some states, we have a line between alcohol and marijuana. Okay, alcohol is where we are willing to draw the line. No marijuana or anything else, you know. So what happens then? Because people don't say that alcohol is a gateway drug, or at least that's not the stigma behind it, right? Is that just because it's legal? And because marijuana is probably one of the least affecting, or I should say least addictive.
I don't even know.
Illegal
if that's not addictive.
drugs?
I think it's the least problematic.
Problematic. There you go. Thank
Yeah.
you. Better wording.
Right.
Yeah. Is it that line? Is that why people say, oh, it's a gateway drug? Because it's basically the most problematic, illegal, quote unquote, drug? Or, I mean, would we have the problem that we have with the whole gateway thought if it was legal?
See, it was kind of used as a big, like, widespread propaganda term to make it. So I think we'd have to almost go back to it'd be hard to find, I'm sure, the real reason as to why they didn't want this to exist or why they didn't want people to have access to it. I mean, they used a lot of the Schedule I drugs in the MK Ultra programs that they've done that get people all hooked up on drugs and then push them through psychological abuse till they, you know, spit out some sort of crazy person that they can, you know, have do crazy things. So there's the theory that it was what was it? The paper companies, paper mill companies wanted paper through wood pulp to be like the way to go versus the hemp paper.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a big reason why it was banned, because they're like, oh, well, it can be used for this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know what it all comes down to, but the whole gateway aspect, I would say the only time the gateway drug aspect would apply is if someone's getting into marijuana at a younger age. If
Right.
someone's smoking weed, smoking reefer at 15, 14 years old, sorry to say,
There's a lot of room for them to climb.
there's
Yeah.
a huge mountain for them to climb, and if they went to something so young, generally kids are using it as an escape. Generally, those
Sure.
it starts off as something cool with your friends, but it's psychology at that point. Your brain's not fully developed, so you're really harming yourself.
Right. And you're like, this feels good, so this is good.
Exactly, and you get that kind of built in, and then you're just doing that, and then you get to a tolerance point where it's like, and then odds are, if you're that young in that culture, you're gonna find friends that are into something harder.
Right.
And that leads, here's the other thing. Again, I'm thinking about this as we're talking about it. The other thing too is when it's illegal, you have to buy it off of a dealer. Most of the time, that dealer is going to be selling something else too. And so when you're talking to your dealer, hey, give me some weed. Okay, well, they're like, oh, well, maybe I'm out of weed. Or maybe they have a relationship with their dealer where they're like, oh, well, maybe I'm trying to try something new. What would you suggest or whatever? Or maybe the dealer just sells them on it. They do give the sales pitch because they can get more money for cocaine versus weed.
Yeah.
And so I could see that argument too, is that when you have a dealer that's selling you weed, if they're selling something else, it's just that much easier, and that could add to the gateway stigma as well.
Sure. I'm sure there's a bunch of nuance to it. There's probably a bunch of little things that kind of make it that way.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that kind of plays too. The addictive personalities are going to be a lot easier to be manipulated by that drug dealer to get them into something different.
Yeah.
You like
Hey,
this,
I got
you'll
this.
love this.
Yeah, you'll love this. And to them, I mean, if you look at all sales in general, you kind of have to be, not every salesperson's obviously an evil person, but you have to have a level to be okay with deceiving people and manipulating people, because obviously you need to make money, right? So you're trying to sell them something that they may or may not need. You got to upgrade them with the bells and whistles, and it might not, maybe you're getting hammered by your boss to sell those things. So I get it. It's not really a good system, but that sales environment is, whether it's legal or illegal, I mean, it's the same.
Well, it comes down to it comes down to your livelihood versus theirs.
Right.
Right.
I'm taking care of number one. This is my job. I have to sell this to you. Take it. Here's reason 1, 2, 3, 4.
There's probably not that many moral drug dealers out there that actually care.
Right.
And
Or-
so they see these people coming in and they're just destroying themselves, and they're probably like, well, they're just a good customer to them, man.
Right.
There's a lot of
Loyal
sales.
customer.
Loyal customer.
Steady
Yeah.
pay.
Right.
There's a lot of salesmen out there.
Yes.
That are ruthless.
Oh, yeah.
Cell phones, whatever it is. They don't care what your situation is. If they can sell you the iPhone 15 Max versus just the regular iPhone 15, they will.
Yeah.
Even if you go in there and say, oh, I don't know if I can really afford even, whatever free Samsung you're
Well,
giving out.
it's all we got on the shelf, so you'll have to.
Yeah,
if you need a phone,
stuff
you'll
like
have
that.
to take
There you
this.
go.
You got to take this one, man.
Yep.
That's all we got.
Yep. So
I can get you a good deal on it too.
yeah, and I imagine that's just amplified in the world of illegal things. It's just that much more.
Well, obviously, if it's illegal, it's probably going to attract the more immoral salesmen.
Right.
Just, in general.
And it's going to attract a more, what's the word? It's going to attract the clientele that are going to be easier to manipulate.
Right.
So,
And I'd say this is all in camp for why it should be legal. Mm-hmm. Because, then you don't have your outside sources. However, it is hilarious how much the prices translated from the street prices, to the overly taxed prices, what they are now.
Mm-hmm.
But the prices, they translated almost exactly the same, which is so funny. And I thought, it's like, what did these guys just go around all the illegal markets and get a bunch of sales and then build an average? All right, well, this is what we're going to charge for flour, and this is what we're going to charge, whatever.
yeah.
Sure.
I think it's kind of funny.
Do you think, let me ask you this then, do you think that legalizing marijuana has led to more of a crisis in in cutting it with other drugs?
I personally do not.
It's just a thought, because if they're getting it legally, it's obviously regulated. So when you're buying weed off the street, I could
Well,
see.
yeah, you've just put those guys out of business, and now they need to
Right.
find a new way back
Well,
in.
they need to, right, exactly. That's exactly my point. I'm just
It's like,
wondering
sure, you
if-
can get weed down at the market, but this is super weed.
How much do
with
you
fentanyl in it?
how much of that do you think correlates then to that crossover? I mean, because we have a huge fentanyl crisis right now.
That's true. I honestly don't know how they would mix that with like a concentrate version of marijuana.
I don't know.
I don't know. You sprinkle it on the flour.
like
Does
the
that do?
dabs, like the people do?
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like the concentrated stuff. Like maybe you
Sure.
can mix it into that. I don't know how else they would really mix it into, because you've got your vape. What they just use like an oil. You
Sure.
know, you've got that concentrates, and then the flour, which is just they grow the plant. I mean, what are you? I think what I'm getting at. I think is fentanyl is a hard drug problem. I think it's a lot easier to cut with cocaine, with crack, even with other
Okay.
pills. I would, I'm not in the marketing. I don't know. I don't buy these things, but I would assume that there's a market for crushed up pills.
yeah,
You
Sure,
could probably
yeah,
buy pre-crushed
yeah.
up pills in like a little vial or something.
yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Stuff like that to sprinkle the same color pill in there. It would be just phenomenally easy.
Yeah.
So I would say that with it being legal, the black market will have, with the prices being set at what they are now, they have a competition of set prices that they do have to compete with. So they would probably be more willing to cut it with cheaper products, maybe something that would be toxic to people that maybe
I.e.
they know, maybe
fentanyl.
they don't know. I.e. fentanyl.
Apparently, fentanyl's
But-
incredibly cheap.
That, and then wasn't there some oil that was going around like in Wisconsin and like the Midwest? People were getting these vape cartridges it was causing some like scarring in the lungs or something like that.
I remember
it was
reading about this.
It was like a oil they were cutting
Yeah.
with that wasn't meant to be
Yeah.
ingested, and it would
Okay.
leave scarring in the lungs. So stuff like that, sure.
Mm-hmm.
The black market having to can go to that to reach lower prices. So they're making more money in that regard. Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah.
Obviously, but
I
I don't think that the set prices necessarily, makes that like, oh well, now it's happening versus now it's not going to happen. It's probably going to happen, just probably more so now that it's legal in most states than it did before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just interesting. There's a lot of stuff, because I don't hang around a lot of people that do any sort of drugs, really. I mean, there's not a lot that I know into this world. And you'd be surprised, considering I work at a jail, but I see the aftermath of someone getting hooked on it.
Yeah,
right.
But I don't necessarily see which honestly, people that are running around doing these really hard drugs and stuff, most of the time, if they knew what life was like after they got hooked on this stuff, I would argue they probably wouldn't. It's the
Wouldn't have
scared.
taken that
It's
first
the
hit.
scared
Yeah.
straight type of idea.
Yeah, sure, but it happens a lot. People don't realize how bad the
No.
thing was until they've done it,
And there are a lot of people that just ignore the consequences too.
Right.
Joey pulled up that, so it was diacetyl so it was frequently added to flavored e-liquid to enhance the taste, and inhaling it causes inflammation, may lead to permanent scarring in the smallest branches of the airways. It's called popcorn lung. So yeah, there's no lasting treatment. I mean, there's treatments to manage it, but it's one of those things of once you've done it to yourself, you've done it to yourself. You're done.
Yeah.
Like, you can manage it, man, but you're going to be coughing, and anytime, at that point, you probably want to quit, but anytime you vape after having that already done, you're going to go into the biggest, worst coughing fit, as if you were having like a bronchial attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that stuff's, and they're just putting it in there, and whether they know that it's going to be bad for you, or it's just a cheap alternative that they view, they didn't
Right.
know. It's a weird world when it comes to these things, because it is pretty new, being legal. I mean, look at how much more potent it's gotten because of
yeah.
it. Because now that it's legal, they can actually put like more research into it, where they're not hiding out. So.
Right. Doing this in their garage.
Right.
Yeah, I do see the value of it, as if it's being something that's regulated and watched over, I do see that there's a benefit there, whether it's recreational or medicinal. If the state makes it recreational, if it's easier for people to get it in a safer fashion than off the streets, I 100% see the appeal to that. But again, here's my other question then is where would you draw the line? Or where would you draw the line? Let's just go there. I think we've already
what would be illegal, like drug wise.
Yeah. And do you see 15, 20, 25 years from now, do you think we'll say the same thing about other drugs that are currently illegal?
I'm not sure about other things that are illegal now. I think isn't there Oregon? We were just kind of talking about it slightly.
Yeah.
Made it legal, but I think there's talks about reversing that because it didn't end up so good. Because
they legalized everything.
They legalized everything.
Yeah.
So when you've given the homeless drug addicts a little shop and you're giving them free money because that's your social welfare programs are built on it. You're just giving them money to go into these shops to get heroin. That they then just go out in the street and just shoot it up. And they don't care. They are beyond shame.
Yeah.
So I mean,
you can't pump gas in Oregon, but you can pump this crap into your arm.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
It's another backwards law.
pretty backwards. Yeah.
No, not here.
But I would call, the line for, I think that's probably going to come down to a person, maybe someone with self-control might say, well, heroin actually helps me out. Maybe someone that can just manage and just do it on a daily basis. They do it one time and they can manage it and whatever. So I don't know. I mean,
I don't know if I buy that.
Yeah, who knows, man?
Well,
it could be an excuse.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? So how much of that, again, this coming from somebody who hasn't done many drugs at all, how much of that, at one point they were saying that weed was highly addictive. You know what I mean? And now, we have...
I think it is to some point, depending on your level of usage of it.
Okay.
Right. I just don't, I think there's an addictiveness of it, but there's no the withdrawal isn't what, with hard drugs like heroin,
Sure.
that,
I'm
the withdrawal can kill
I
you.
almost bet the withdrawal from quitting cigarettes is probably worse than...
Well, a withdrawal from chronic alcoholism is very intense.
Can be fatal.
Can be fatal.
Yeah.
So, all of these things considered, I just wonder, one of the biggest things that I hear people say when they talk about legalizing marijuana is the gateway drug aspect, but also the second one is, where do you draw the line? If you make one legal, where do you draw the line past that? And I think right now, if we were having this conversation 30, 40 years ago, we'd be saying, no, it's terrible for you. It's highly addictive. It's blah, 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 blah.
You're going to get hooked on schmack.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so where does that, do you think, like I said, if 15, 20, 25 years from now, the argument could be made that, okay, well, 25 years from now, cocaine's going to be legal because people are saying that they can handle it.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, how do you,
I mean, cocaine used to be legal and was like a prescription drug. So
I think heroin was too.
Yes.
It was meth.
well, all of them were. Yeah. I mean,
meth is kind of still around.
meth was used in, forms of meth are still in use today.
A lot of the
Adderall and things
cough,
like that.
well, the cough medicines too. The methyl, whatever it's called, is a component of it or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know. So Joey did pull up the addiction stats from the CDC here.
Okay,
we got
interesting.
So they call it the addiction they refer to as cannabis use disorder or marijuana use disorder. It says, let's see, one study estimated that approximately 3 in 10 people who use marijuana have marijuana use disorder, which is basically how they describe it here is some people who use marijuana will develop marijuana use disorder, meaning that they're unable to stop, even though it's causing health and social problems in their lives. I would say they're trying to call it addiction.
Right.
Weirdly, in a different
but
form.
like not calling it addiction.
Right, yeah.
It's like if you're saying that they're addicted to it, then just say that they're addicted to it.
Exactly.
I wonder if there's a portion of this article that you've got pulled up, Joey, too, maybe another article. But I wonder how much of the addiction, so cigarettes, they've done studies that actually have a chemical, there's chemical reasons why you are addicted to them.
The nicotine.
Right.
Yes.
So is the is the addiction coming from just wanting to have the high, or is it something that is chemical inside of the drug itself?
Oh, the stats did say, I mean, 10% was adulthood likeliness addiction, and then it's greater if they're experience it in their youth, which I think we kind of touched on a little earlier, which does make sense. I mean, all these things do make sense. I mean, it's kind of like, common sense would indicate that, if someone got used to using something pretty young, they're probably going to incorporate that into their life, and I mean, if they probably stopped, they'd be a whole different person.
Right.
After 5-6 years of just
using
nonstop
it
use.
pre-development.
Right, while they're developing, exactly. And then, and then you get out of it, you're probably just almost like a worthless vessel. Like zombie mode.
Yeah, so like nicotine, in cigarettes, you have nicotine as the kind of main thing that everyone says that is what makes you addicted to it. And I'm a smoker myself, so I understand it. There is a chemical level. I think there are several other things. When you talk about addiction, there are several other things than just the small amount of the chemical that's causing it. But and part of that is growing up with it, or introducing it into your everyday life. I get that aspect of it. But with weed specifically, I just wonder, maybe you guys know other people, but is it the addiction to the high, or do you think it's something relatable like cigarettes, where it's a chemical thing that they can't really sometimes explain? In other words, with cigarettes, there's 3 days where if you quit, there's 3 days where there's a chemical thing that's telling your brain, I need to smoke,
Yeah, and you get all agitated.
Right, right.
I'd say the same thing happens if with weed.
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably about the same deal.
You can read that better than I.
Why is marijuana addictive, people? That's kind of funny. Results from empirical studies have shown that THC stimulates neurons in the reward system to release the signaling chemical neurotransmitter dopamine at levels higher than typically observed in response to natural rewarding stimuli. So alterations in dopamine signaling or levels of dopamine are generally associated with other drugs of addiction.
So then
it's making you feel good.
Right.
You want to feel good. I mean, it's a cigarette. Why do you smoke?
Right. Right.
Makes you feel good.
I get it.
Makes you feel good.
I get it.
You're just looking for that feel good moment. With the cigarette, so cigarettes are weird. Like, I smoked so that, because when I was in an office, I wanted my break. I wanted to be able to go outside and spend some time outside. It was nothing more than me than that. That's all I wanted. Mm-hmm. So I used it as that crutch.
Sure.
No one's going to, smokers go out and smoke you have your little breaks. It is what it is. Everybody in the office knows what it is.
For me, smoking, it's become a, I got to go feel better than I am now. You know what I mean? And I think I would argue though that that's because of I've allowed it to become an everyday thing to the point where it's chemically, it's a chemical thing in me.
Sure.
And with this, what's interesting, because I've also heard the argument that the reason marijuana is a gateway drug is because it's one of the less lethal drugs that people get addicted to because of the high. It's not necessarily a chemical reaction that's making you addicted to it, but you're getting addicted to the high.
Well, sure it is, because it's releasing that dopamine in your brain.
Yeah.
And as it said, at a much higher rate than natural reward
right,
system.
so like nicotine would be a chemical, a thing that is added to the cigarettes to get you hooked on it.
Sure.
And a lot of people would argue that it's the gateway drug because, again, it's one of the less lethal drugs that doesn't have anything chemically added to it to get you hooked, and people get addicted to that high.
It could be down to the government wanted to save people, the nanny state. Maybe we know that, like, most people would try this and they'll be fine. Mm-hmm. Maybe some people can do it on a manageable level and they'll be okay.
But there's 3 in 10 people cannot.
But there's some people here that just will destroy themselves with this product. So maybe it all came from a good sense of, well, we can't let everybody have this thing because 3% of them are going to just destroy themselves. Or even a smaller percentage, it doesn't really matter. Whatever they saw and whatever they did risk management and decided that needed to happen. That could be it. That would I kind of explain.
Actually,
what you're looking at there.
Yeah, and again, all these light bulbs are popping up in my brain. I wonder what makes alcohol so addictive, because there's not necessarily anything chemically added to alcohol, and people get addicted to alcohol just as easily as a lot of times they do cigarettes. So if that's the case, if it's the same as marijuana, where it's not, there's nothing added to it, then a lot of people could argue that alcohol is the gateway drug.
Yeah, and I mean they did try making that illegal at one point.
Oh yeah, it didn't work out.
Didn't
very
really
well.
work out very well.
Yeah, but as we take a swig here of beer,
You sure do.
but we'll give Joey a second. But it's interesting because I kind of see both sides of that coin, because I mean, why are people not saying that alcohol is the gateway drug when it's doing the same thing? It's doing the same thing to your, or the reason people get addicted to it is for the same reason. It's not necessarily a chemical thing.
Right. Sure.
And I guess I think I might argue that one of the reasons is because they can sell beer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the Recovery Centers of America here has it. The physical factors of alcohol addictiveness. So it's drinking alcohol stimulates the release of dopamine.
Okay.
So
Yep.
and endorphins within the brain.
Okay.
The chemicals that produce feelings of pleasure and satisfaction act as a natural painkiller. And the studies have shown that genetic factors come into play when determining how alcohol reacts in the brain of different people.
Okay.
So that would make sense too. That would apply to some people being more prone to be alcoholics than not. Other people can just drink and be fine. We got so it says alcohol can actually make physical changes in the brain's chemistry and functioning, which that plays the part in making it addictive. The brain's reward pleasure centers are overloaded, and the user experiences cravings to repeat those experiences, which essentially is every addiction, I would say. Some are going to have the chemical factor
Sure.
that make that a lot stronger, but it all comes back to psychological shielding.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I've always been able to know if I've been messing up or not.
Yeah.
If I've done something wrong, I feel it. I know it.
Mm-hmm.
And that applies to everything, So, I mean, I've been overly drunk and done some stupid things and felt like a complete idiot.
Everyone's been there. Everyone's been there. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I
even,
think a lot of it comes down to psychology. So, because I mean, you got your alcoholism, like other addictions. It's ultimately a learned behavior. Right here on this website that we've been reading, the Recovery Centers of America, learned behavior can probably be applied to even cigarette smoking.
Oh yeah,
yeah. The
well,
nicotine's an addictive
yes.
component to it, but you're still choosing to smoke because I mean, yeah, you might have 3 days of crap. You might be a little bit agitated. You might be a little bit of a dick, for those 3 days.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, after that, you'll be fine. You don't have to go
Right.
and buy the cigarettes.
Well, and the 3 days. The 3 days is when they say that the nicotine has made its way completely through you.
Okay.
You don't have any more nicotine in you.
I used to quit all the time because
Yeah.
I mean, being deployed, you can smoke on base, but when you're out on patrol, you're not smoking cigarettes.
Right.
I mean,
Nor do you
might
really
as well
have
give
access
smoke
to
signal.
them. Yeah.
That too.
Coming off of alcoholism though too, that can kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Alcohol
100%.
withdrawal can absolutely kill you.
Yeah,
Yep.
and cigarettes can too. I mean, any one of these could,
Well,
right?
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Overuse of any of these
too much
can
nicotine.
kill you.
Yes. That's what you mean. Yeah,
Nicotine-
100%.
Oh, with withdrawals. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well,
yeah.
Too much alcohol will
withdrawals,
kill
yep.
you. Alcohol withdrawal will kill you. Too much nicotine can kill you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say nicotine withdrawal will kill you.
No.
Maybe.
No.
Well, yeah.
no.
If you're really
well,
sickly.
If you're,
No,
if you're
there
on
are
your
stories-
deathbed with lung cancer, and all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, we're cutting you off of your
Yeah, and that
Marlboro lights." Like that's
that
it
was
for
it.
me.
Yep.
Yep.
You
Yep.
exactly.
Well, there are stories though. There are stories of very heavy smokers.
Sure.
Reaching the age of 85, and the doctor says, "Look, you need to stop now. 0, no more." And the sudden shock to their body, the withdrawal in their body, it ends them. It ends them. That being said, that may be because they have a more frail, immune
Right.
system and all of
Right.
that, because of either one, the reason they told them to stop smoking in the first place, or two, their age.
Well, you become dependent on something for, like you said, if they're in their 80s, assuming
Yeah.
they started when they're teenagers.
Right.
You've been smoking for 60 years and taking that steady nicotine in, and then one day you just cut it off, and it's like, your body's like, I don't know what's happening. Here's a heart attack about it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Here's a message. I need something.
Yeah, I think there's
missing.
Yeah.
Oh, Joey's keeping us honest here. What is cigarette withdrawal, and can you die from it? Oh, what's this website? I can't read the link.
Smoke-free clinic.
Smoke-free clinic. All right. Cigarette withdrawal can be extremely unpleasant. Yep, okay. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But you
Yep.
cannot die from it. Understanding why the feelings are occurring and where they're coming from can be helpful in easing the anxiety around them. So, I mean, yeah, essentially it's just annoying.
Right.
Right.
You know, and
It
maybe
is.
maybe in what you're saying in the 80, you know, that
Shit,
person is so
it'll make you dang near feel like you got the flu.
it can definitely make
There-
you feel
yeah.
sick. Yeah.
Yep. People ask me why I don't quit. I tell them I have quit several times, and then I pick them up again.
It's like, man, this man cold won't go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Either-
it's my withdrawals, and I think I'm about to cave.
yeah.
All right.
It's either that or I tell them my mom didn't raise a quitter.
Yeah, there you go.
We got to keep them going. man.
But
That's
okay,
great.
so I guess what's really interesting about this, and this is why I like having these conversations, is because it forces me to think as well. It's really interesting that we find that alcohol and marijuana both react the same way, and they don't react the same way in the brain. What the reason people get addicted to them is pretty much because of the same thing.
The
It's
dopamine.
because of
Yeah.
it's because of the way they feel once they've done it.
Yep.
You know, and so again, when people argue, well, people chase the high, that's why it's the gateway drug. Well, we could say the same thing about alcohol. But
Sure.
the only thing, I would argue probably that the only reason that alcohol is said to be not said to be the gateway drug is because they can sell it.
It's legal.
They can sell it.
It's taxed.
And
Right.
it's taxed, and they can't sell as much of it if you tell them that it's a gateway drug. So I have a feeling that now that we've talked about this a little bit, I've thought about it, and I'd be willing to bet that the more and more recreational cannabis becomes a thing, the less and less we'll hear about the gateway drug thing because they're selling it.
Yeah, it's kind of proven.
Right.
You know, proven to not be the case.
Whether it's proven or not, they're going to still try to sell it. So they don't want people thinking that.
Right.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
whether-
they changed. Yep.
Yeah, I mean whether
a
it's proven or not, they don't
180.
care.
I'm sure Illinois isn't pushing the gateway drug anymore.
Yeah.
They're like,
No.
give us those sweet,
Please come in.
sweet tax
No, yeah,
dollars.
it's yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So
With
okay,
all the dispensaries, I've not seen a single road repair happen yet.
yeah.
By the way.
Well, okay. So Colton, you brought up the tax money that's coming from it because it's so heavily taxed. So another interesting argument that I have that I've heard people say is we could use the money that's used or that's received from that on the taxes to do XYZ.
Well,
So-
I thought you were going to give me an example. Sorry.
No, well, I've heard several. That's my
Yeah.
that's exactly my point. Is what do you think?
Are you hearing any like more than others though? Like, are you
I
hearing
hear
a consistent one?
I hear road infrastructure. I hear schools,
Well, then what are the toll roads
education.
for in Illinois?
Right. Well, those are sold. Those are Chinese now.
Why?
Well, because
Why is it legal for me to pay tolls on a roadway with the clear inherent thought that if I pay tolls on this roadway, it'll contribute to the repair and well-being, like kept condition of this road?
Yeah, no.
And reality is it's just going into a corporation's
I
pocket.
do my
Yes,
best.
some
John,
companies making a lot of money off
yeah,
of the state of Illinois.
I'll do my best. Donald Trump. China.
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 Why did you
So-
ask China?
Yeah. No. Yeah. The Illinois tollways are owned by China.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I literally every time I go to Illinois, I complain that I can't imagine living in this state and traveling these toll roads and these roads to still be as hot garbage as they are.
Yeah. They
Yeah,
sold
right.
those tollways within probably 15, 20 years of having them.
I don't understand why that's legal.
I think
don't-
when they came
well,
out, it was only
what-
supposed to be for a year.
What is the
Yeah,
service? What is
exactly.
the service that company is providing other than literally extorting people for money on the road?
Well, they're making sure that the tolls take our money, that they're staying
yeah.
operational.
Well, what's the point of it if that toll has nothing to do with the infrastructure of that road? You know, it's my understanding that that's the purpose of a tollway.
That's what it should be.
Colton, I'm going to stop you right there.
Am I using sense?
Yeah,
something?
you're talking about Illinois right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very corrupt state.
Yeah. Extremely corrupt.
I'm not even talking about corruption. I'm talking about just dumb people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those FIBs.
FIBs. We have a little term for the people of Illinois.
Your neighbors?
My neighbors.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't want to take any part of that.
Fair enough.
I'm
I wouldn't
Wisconsin
either.
at heart.
Yeah.
Born and raised.
There you
Born
go.
and raised.
There you go.
Absolutely.
So yeah, what do you think? What do you think those tax dollars that are used from the sale of cannabis? What do you think they should best be used for? Like I said, I've heard road infrastructure. I've heard education. I've heard all kinds
education
of
is
stuff.
state infrastructure too. It should automatically go back to the state's infrastructure. I am so sick of states using taxpayer money to fund things that it's just like, or just giving money to the federal government that it's like, what are we doing? I don't care about gender studies in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, okay.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, what is the purpose of this? This money should automatically, it should go nowhere other than the community that it was taking it from.
Okay.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
the purpose
I
of
don't
these
think it should be
taxes.
tax at all. I think it should be, well, tax to whatever. I don't believe in taxes, so it's hard for me to even say this.
Sure.
That's fair.
Sure.
I understand the purpose behind taxes, and I understand there's no way they're going to implement this without a tax.
Sure.
But those taxes, quite honestly, it could be tax-free.
I would be more open to, like a local tax on just products in that community that
These
you're
states,
buying.
these states already take so many taxes from us, and it's like
Right.
we're in a surplus. It's like, okay, well then give me back the extra money you took from
Yeah.
me. Why did you need a surplus in tax
Right.
money, revenue from me?
It's absolutely ridiculous that we're getting income tax and then tax on the goods we buy. It's just all these taxes. It's unreal.
I don't care about your salary,
And then also,
congressman. I care about getting more of my paycheck back in my pocket.
Right.
Exactly.
well, you're taxed when you die.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's inheritance tax too. So
You're taxed when you die,
your
and
kids,
you're taxed when their kids inherit.
kids are getting taxed
Yep.
on what they're inheriting. It's unreal. All the taxes.
money
out here.
that they're inheriting that was already taxed at one point when it was paid to you in the first place.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. There's lots of reasons to be mad in this world.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really, really crazy though. I just don't think there should be an excess tax on these things in order to make it legal.
Well, then what
in
would be
order
the
to make
purpose
it,
of the ATF?
Yeah.
I guess we
that's-
do have to give. Oh my god,
Yeah.
what is the purpose of the ATF? Is to be shut down. The only thing that needs to happen to the ATF is it just needs to be
Yep.
ended. There's
Yep.
no reason for it to exist.
People that don't know, that's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms,
Yeah.
which should be a convenience store more than a.
Yeah. Right.
branch of
Exactly.
government.
Yeah.
It sounds like something.
100%.
something
Oh,
something you
that's
see on
an
the side.
idea.
It's like next to a Buc-ee's down in Texas.
That's
right.
Oh man, that's an idea. Just start up a convenience store that sells gun and just name it ATF.
That'd be great.
I'm sure there's some
There's
legality
somebody
issues
out
with.
Well,
know.
Screw them. It
well,
lasts for.
Joey, pull up. How old
You
is
can
the
sell
ATF?
2 of the 3 together, but never all 3 at once.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, I think
51 years old.
the ATF.
Yeah,
Oh, good grief.
What does that put him in the 70s?
Yes.
it's about the time that the communists were infecting us with their Hydra system. Yeah,
Yeah,
it makes about
70
sense. 60s, 70s.
72. Yeah. Yeah, 51 years.
What were okay? So I thought which one were created after the Patriot Act? Weren't there like 3 new ones besides like the
DHS.
TSA? Was it DHS? Was that after the
believe so.
Patriot Act?
What's the one that checks electronics?
Oh,
It's not NR. I was about to say the NRA. It's not the NRA. They're the ones-
FCC,
No, they
No,
spy
no,
on
no.
your computers. They say there was a leaker that fled to Russia.
NSA.
Snowden? NSA.
NSA.
But yeah, the
There's the NSA, and then there's the ODNI, which is another crazy one.
ODNI.
That's like one that you don't hear about a lot, but it was created after the Patriot Act as well.
Okay. A lot of government overreach stems from the Patriot Act.
They created a
But,
fifth
they
branch
give
of
it they give it
government.
an awesome name.
They did.
They gave it an awesome name.
Who's
It's
going to
like,
vote against the
Well,
Patriot Act?
I'm a patriot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just attacked. Of course, this is a good thing.
I think the only person that voted no on it was Ron Paul, my hero.
Yeah. The best president we never had.
Yeah.
Oh, he would have been great
Imagine
back
what
in
this world
2012.
would, imagine what
did-
this world would be like.
Be so good.
Yeah. He was one of the first ones that, like, libertarianism, he made kind of popular,
Yeah.
And he wasn't even that staunch libertarian. He was more just
I think he was American, man. He was just like
Yes.
American. Like that's
Yeah.
how America should be. Is Ron Paul?
he was like
like
a
guys.
progressive conservative, whatever
Right.
that means. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like
exactly.
I still cling to conservative values, but also
right.
these aren't really conservative values, these things that we're enforcing. So we can go ahead and ease up on that.
Yeah. Like stop calling you guys conservatives. You know you're all part of the fascist uniparty. We're all in
Yeah.
you're all in the same club here. Don't try to make it anything different.
Both wings of the same bird.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, so I don't know if we answered the question yet. If
The line.
yeah, where's the line?
See, it is a hard thing to say because it's like, well, should there just be a store where they can just buy like Adderall and like all these other pharmaceutical drugs without a prescription? You know, if you think about it in that terms, should there be
Just a fentanyl drugstore.
just a fentanyl drugstore out there? You know,
Let them sort
like,
themselves out.
yeah, you know, I mean, you're pretty much. It's just like the Canadian thing where they're government assistance in dying.
Oh my god.
You know, it's basically the same thing.
Oh,
Well,
you're,
just free
you're
will.
poor, you can't afford.
Oh.
You're a disabled veteran, and you have.
Oh, you can't have a
You don't
house.
have the means to pay for a disability ramp to help you get into your house. Have you considered killing yourself about
Yes.
it? That's literally
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
kind of
I think
things going on.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that specific example actually was.
That is a
It's like,
literal example I just used.
yeah. You need a handicap ramp and you can't
need
afford
a
it?
handicap
Oh.
ramp and you can't afford it.
Have you thought about death?
See, we the government won't help you fund that. We won't
Yes.
help you build a angled deck,
No.
but we will help you kill yourself.
Yes. We got you. So where's the line, right?
Well, that same argument could be used for opioids. Like you're basically allowing people to destroy their lives
Yep.
and fall into addiction, and it will lead to death. And there was a huge issue with that. OIF 1, I guess, troops coming back. These guys have mental issues, you know, from things they've seen. They're struggling with PTSD, or
Oh, yeah.
they've been blowing up, so they have very like physical pain throughout their bodies from
Yep.
dealing with having been blown up and put back together. And do opioids about it
Yeah.
with no plan to ever draw you off of them.
Yeah.
No, we're
So
just
now
gonna
you're
keep you
going on
it.
a decade of opioid use, and now it's like, okay, we have a better idea now. It's like, well, I'm addicted to the point where I'll probably die if you pull me off opioids.
Yeah.
You could have put all those
That's-
guys on weed and they'd probably be fine and happy, living good, prosperous lives.
Yep.
You know.
And that's
It's
just one
sad.
example. I mean, it affects more than just the veteran community too.
Oh, yeah.
Like especially in like the Northeast, I know like Virginia, West Virginia specifically had huge addiction issues. I mean, there's places all over the country.
Oh,
but
yeah.
just those places I'm using specifically where they abuse opioids.
Yeah, there are pockets where it's a big problem, much bigger than even around here. You
Right.
know,
No,
And they'll
no.
always be pushing. Don't be afraid to take opioids if they're prescribed to you. And I'll admit I have taken them before, but I generally tend to wean myself off of it earlier than
Yeah.
You know, I just do the old ibuprofen Tylenol mix after a while.
I try not to even get involved. You know, like I had a hernia operation. My wife's like, "Oh, you need to take this." If it was before bed. Nah, honey, I feel okay.
yeah,
You know, I'm trying to put it off as long as I can because they just gave me
Right.
like a bottle of like 50 freaking Vicodins. You know, I'm like, oh great. So
Take as
it
many
was
as
great
pop 'em like
advice. It was
Tums.
really good advice. I should have taken it because I woke up in the middle of the night in excruciating pain.
yeah,
Oops.
yeah.
I'll listen to you next
Well,
time.
there is a stigma where you don't even want to. It's like I know the road that this
Right.
leads people down, and
Just-
I don't want to even risk it.
Yeah, but
I
then-
don't want to be addicted to heroin,
Yeah.
which is what opiates
Yeah.
are. They are heroin.
Yeah.
Essentially, they are heroin.
But then you have, but I know several people. I myself have been prescribed stuff that is highly addictive, and yet I don't have the draw to keep doing it. You know.
Sure.
So there is some again of that responsibility, and if you're somebody that has a hard time with addictions of any kind,
Sure.
I'd probably say that addictions are most of the time are just poor impulse control.
Fair.
A lot of
But there are a
times.
lot of people that get prescribed things like opioids
Oh,
for,
yeah, absolutely.
say, I have a chronic illness that causes pain.
Yeah.
Here's opioids.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yep.
oh, so I'm just going to take these forever, is
Yep.
what you're telling me. As long as this condition, which is chronic, so it will not go away, I will be on these. And then it's like, you know,
Yeah.
it's like, it's almost like if you're on it too long. And, you know, early on, like I said, in those early days, they didn't realize that, oh, we can't just prescribe it to him every time he says he hurts
Yeah.
and he'll be fine. You know?
And all these companies got sued into oblivion for doing just that. They were giving
Right.
doctors incentives to prescribe opioids. They were
course.
getting huge bonuses for doing it. So they're getting money, you know.
And that is
just to
one
treat-
thing I
it's
will give
easy.
props to the VA for is they have come full circle on that and fixed themselves. I have to go in for wisdom teeth in January, and
Uh-oh.
they asked me specifically, "Do you want to be prescribed opioids for painkillers?" They're like, "We can prescribe them to you, but we heavily urge against it."
Oh, wow. Yeah,
And I was like,
that's
okay.
definitely an about face.
I was like, well, what's the alternative? And it was, I'll be honest, they were like, it's ibuprofen and Tylenol mix. You know, basically, it's
Sure.
really strong. And it works, but I'm like, we'll see how I feel after. I'm like,
Yeah, wisdom teeth, maybe.
I might want these opioids.
Well, I
I'll
was
be
gonna
honest.
say, how do you answer that? Could be. So you said
Like,
they're
I don't know
being
what my
careful
level of
about it.
They had prescribed it for me for another mouth surgery they did, and
Okay.
it worked decently, but they were when you're coming off it, it was just like, oh my god, this hurts so bad. Like I wish they would have gave me something stronger, but then it was like, you know what, I'll be all right. I'll tough it out.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
But
How do you
mostly
answer
just
the-
because it was just like, don't give me opioids if you don't need it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like that. I think that was an issue. Is an over prescription of them
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
for situations that it's like, oh, your shoulder hurts, your back hurts, here's opioids. It's like, how about Tylenol,
Well, it's
Advil?
It's
Yeah.
just an easier. I
Warm
think.
compress.
Yeah, I think it's just it probably just devolved into something that was it was just easier for the
It's a-
doctor
yeah,
to tell
it's
you
a
to.
quick Band-Aid fix.
Yeah.
We
Well,
got a ton of this on hand to give you.
And I mean, the things came out with COVID too. They were getting incentives for how many people get vaccines.
Oh, yeah.
Even the
Yep.
like it came out. You know, it's obviously not related to COVID, but it came out that the whole vaccination schedule at all, like, you know how they give your kids a million freaking shots anymore, but like all those shots, if they get all of them, they get incentives based on the shots that they're giving the kids.
Oh, absolutely. It's the same with the hospitals getting kickbacks for
Right.
COVID deaths.
Right.
in general.
Exactly.
How many deaths came out? They clearly had a heart attack, or
My
they clearly were in a-
grandmother passed away this last Thanksgiving in the hospital.
Oh, sorry.
She
man.
had COVID at the time, was not presenting COVID symptoms. She had sepsis from a botched surgery prior to that. She was in sepsis.
Wow, and
They attempted to put COVID as her cause of death.
Oh, wow.
And that got the kibosh, like, you're not profiting off this.
Yeah.
Like, your mess up, like, I was furious when I found out about that. I'm like, because it was Beloit Hospital
course.
that had the issue. This was in Madison that we're finding this out. You know, it was
Okay.
finally like, okay, well, Beloit's not doing anything except prescribing me more painkillers. So can we go to Madison where they'll probably, and they immediately, you know, the second she walks in and tells them the issue, they're like, oh, let's get an MRI, let's get CAT scans, let's do all.
Wow.
Like, oh wow, yeah, a doctor being a doctor,
Yeah.
trying
Yeah,
to
that's
find
a
the
hard
cause
thing to
of a
find.
problem.
It's a hard. That's kind of what I was trying to lean into in the case of today's care, you know, healthcare system. There's no more. It's not a. It's like a subscription based service now.
It's
like
for profit.
It's
It-
for
yeah,
profit.
nothing
Let's
else.
get
All
you
it
on
is.
this. This isn't going to make your ailment go
Yeah.
away.
Individual
It's just
healthcare
going to
workers
treat it. You're going to
may
have to
care,
come back.
But like you said, yeah, exactly. It's
You're
like,
gonna
I'm
have-
not
yep.
looking to fix you. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not looking to cure you.
No, I'm going to
yeah.
keep you coming, but I'm going to keep you going good for a little while,
And
and
that's
then
how
you come
people,
back
like my
and we'll get you
grandfather.
more.
Oh my gosh, his pills that he takes every day. I'm like, what do all of these do?
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even remember anymore. I just remember I just got them scheduled out, so when I have to take them, I'm like,
How many old people are on blood pressure medications that if
Yeah.
they stop taking, it will screw up their blood pressure,
Yeah.
and they can now not
Yeah.
stop taking these
right.
medications.
Yeah,
It just
exactly.
makes
my
you
grandmother
wonder-
was another one of those. She was on heart medication so long that it was like, well, by now she's dependent on
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
was
you
getting to
can
the
do-
point where it's like, oh, your heart rate's really low. It's like, well, you have me on this blood pressure medication
Yeah.
that lowers my heart rate.
Oh man.
And I can't get off of it because it'll do detrimental damage to my body, which is already in peril because my heart rate is so low.
Do you ever wonder how people 100 years ago survived?
They died at 30.
Okay, I get.
Well,
I
maybe not. You know,
Not at 30.
They did
Yeah,
die
they
much.
did
but I'm
die.
just wondering. I'm just wondering how.
You either died in childbirth, or like in infancy, or you lived to be 40. There was like no in between.
Yeah, yeah. I get.
It's like if you survive childbirth, you might lose an arm in some terrible manufacturing accident or
Yeah.
something. But
Right.
Well, I'm just wondering. Like, I think there's so many drugs out there that are prescribed or recommended. You know, it makes you wonder how many of them that everyone takes that you know the big pharma says you need to take this or you will die.
I'm at the point where I refuse prescription medications.
That's kind
Like
of
when
what
my
I'm-
doctor tries to say you should take this pill to do this, I'm like,
Like I'm gonna
what
look into
is-
it.
What is the remedy that I can do without being on a pill to do
Yeah.
this? And they're like,
Well-
well, you can change your diet like this. I'm like, how about start with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and another thing too.
Why? It's like I know that doesn't make you any money,
Right.
but it's better for my health and well-being.
right.
We don't
Yeah.
care about that.
But they don't
It's
care
not going to
about
pay their bills.
And I don't necessarily go down the rabbit hole of all of the, holistic type stuff,
Well, look at the diet of people who lived in this country in the Cold War. Do you know what gym class looked like during the Cold War?
Oh, it was
We were
intense.
creating super soldiers.
It was basic training
No
on
lie.
steroids.
Like kids, not our age, were a little bit out of high school, but like if you were like a high school senior, you looked like Dolph Lundgren. Like, you know what I mean?
Right?
Like you were
Yeah.
jacked because they were pumping kids up and they were actually taking physical health seriously. And look at where those people are now. Those people are probably now in their 60s, 50s, 60s ish. I know a lot of very healthy 60-year-olds, 50, 60-year-olds.
A lot.
But it's like, obviously as time went on and our diets in America have just tanked. Like we no longer go to the butcher shop and get our meat or
Right.
grow a garden in our backyard for our vegetables. We go to the supermarket and we get packaged meat that comes from God knows where, probably Brazil.
Well, a lot of
That's
the
where, like-
lab
that's where,
meat
like,
has actually been
80%.
proven to be cloned meat.
Really?
Yeah, it was like an Alex
80%.
Jones thing that came out, and they were like, "Oh, no,
yeah.
It's Alex Jones," and they came out and yeah, it's true.
That's awful.
It's horrible.
80% of the chicken in U.S. supermarkets comes from Brazil. What do you know about Brazilian chicken raising methods?
It's probably not the cleanest.
I know nothing about it,
Yeah,
which
exactly,
is probably
yeah.
a problem.
Right.
It's not like you can just be like, well, the FDA approved it. It's like, well,
Yeah.
American companies. I don't know what the process is for them to get.
Oh, it's
sent
not-
here.
yeah,
it's
it's not-
probably have to meet it, but it's still like it's meeting their standard here without you ever knowing what got you to that product in the first place.
Right. It's not like they'd be, taking advantage of some sort of unethical, reason why they
Right.
would do. It's good.
Look how
Yeah.
prosperous we were. Look how cheap chicken is.
Yeah.
We don't even hatch eggs anymore. We just clone these things, dude.
Right.
We're just pumping them out.
Yeah. And chicken ain't cheap either. Chicken
No,
ain't cheap either.
Absolutely.
Jeez.
not. Meat in general is not
yeah.
cheap. I am so bummed I didn't get a deer this year during gun season.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Because I'm like, man, I was really riding on that to really even out my grocery bills.
Right.
Oh,
You know?
Right.
Well, we got Joey pulled it up here. 2001, when it became apparent that animal cloning may become a commercial venture to help improve the quality of herds, FDA requested livestock producers and researchers to keep food from animal clones or their offspring out of the food supply. Since then, FDA has conducted an intensive evaluation that included examining the safety of food from these animals and risk to animal health. 2001, this is all happening.
Wow.
So based on a final
it's
risk
guaranteed
assessment.
implemented by now.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah. And
Based on a
they're
final
not
risk
denying,
assessment, a report written by FDA scientists and issued in January 2008, FDA has concluded that meat and milk from cow, pig, and goat clones and the offspring of any animal clones are safe as food we eat every day.
I'm sure they are. Just
Mm-hmm.
like I'm sure we should just all switch to insects like Bill Gates wants us to.
Well, it's much better for you, obviously. I'm joking.
Nuts.
Dude, I will.
Yeah.
They're already so they're calling it the Latin name for cricket, and they're putting it in your chips and stuff already.
No.
I mean, you got to look for it on your bags.
That's their way of getting around it because chips are already, you're allowed to have so much like material from
Yeah.
insect inside of it.
Yeah.
Because just
Oh, yeah.
in the
cereal
process
too.
of-
Any
Coffee.
grains. Any
You drink
grains.
coffee?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Coffee beans, grains,
There's bugs
grapes.
in there.
Peanut
There's
butter?
bugs everywhere.
Peanut butter? Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, it's a certain parts per million. You're good.
Yeah, it's whatever.
Right.
And I don't care, but I'm not eating the actual like it's not
Right.
listed as the ingredient.
It is not my primary source of protein.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They want us on bug protein so we're all not like the kids going through gym class in the Cold War.
Right.
They want us all weak and,
And I
fragile.
want
We're
that.
easy
Bring
to
it
be controlled.
back.
Bring it back.
Bring back
Oh,
fat
100%.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think
Please.
well,
Honestly, though, but yeah, to a point.
Bring back
you know,
a little bit
it's-
of bullying too.
I
a little
think
bit,
that
man.
has contributed so much. You can't criticize anyone
Yeah.
without it becoming like that's
That's
a hate
exactly
crime.
it.
It's like
That's
it is not a
exactly
hate
it.
crime. I can critique you and not be hating you.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
In fact, I like you so much I'm going to critique you.
Yes.
How's that?
I'm
Yes.
critiquing you because I want you to hear it and take it to heart and do something about it.
Right.
Same way as I hope if somebody sees me doing something detrimental to my health, Joey calling me out about the energy drinks.
There you
He
go.
calls me out about it. He's like, "How many of those do you drink?" I'm like, "Well, now only one a day, but when I was in the military, it was probably 5 a day."
Oh yeah.
And I mean,
those
full
little
size
Rippet cans, those
no.
200 milligram
well, on
caffeines,
deployment,
the
yeah.
little
On
tiny
deployment,
ones.
I had like a whole flat of those. I was a driver on
Oh,
deployment,
yeah.
so it's like I was always in the seat. So it was like every 3 seconds, I'm like, "Oh, that little half can's gone." Breaking out another
I
one.
love
By the
those
end of the
little
trip,
things.
it's just like I look like Jim Leahy getting out of his car in Trailer Park Boys, just like kicking all the beer cans out of my way. You know,
I think
I'm like, I'm sure that was terrific for my health.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
I think what you guys were saying there, I think the better way to say it is, and we've talked about this with parents to kids, you care about your kids, you tell your kids the way it is. You don't hold back because you want them to understand this is the way it is.
Right. You need to understand that I'm not suggesting this. I'm telling you that
Right.
this is the way you act.
And
this is the things you do and do
Right.
not do.
And it breeds
very clear and concise.
Yeah, and it
instructions
breeds
for life.
It breeds accountability. It
Yes.
forces them to be accountable for their own actions.
Even if they break those rules.
Right.
I know when I was young, when I did bad things, I still had a guilty conscience.
Oh, 100%. Every
And
kid,
I might. There's
every
some
kid
things
should.
there are some things I know I did admit to my parents after the fact, but there are things that I'm like, I'll take that to my grave because I can't even bear the shame that I did it.
Sure.
You know, like I
Yep.
admitted to the doing cocaine thing. That would break my mother's heart.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Beyond. Like
Yeah.
acid,
Yeah.
she probably wouldn't even care. She grew up in the 70s. She's like, whatever. But she's like, cocaine, Colton? Really?
Really?
Like,
Yeah.
I'm just like, I know. But I've never done it again. I did it one time. But you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
like, I still have that guilty conscience
there-
from
yeah.
this. Because it's like, they
Yeah.
always told me that you did
And we
not
have
do
people we have people walking around who just believe that they shouldn't have to care about what anyone else
Zero
thinks. They
shame.
don't
There's no
I'll do
shame.
what I want. I don't care who it's like at the end of the day, there's accountability
It's
that
like a
needs
lack
to
of
be had.
shame.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because I say something to you, one, doesn't make it not true.
that. Right.
But two, it doesn't mean that you have to be offended.
And just
If
because
it's-
you don't like what I said to you doesn't mean it's coming from a point of malice.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
So-
I think that's kind of, you teach your kids not to do drugs so they don't go through it, and then it's
Right.
not a gateway drug, and the line should be drawn at.
And
Well,
they
should
like
be
I said, I got
commonsensical.
taught not to do drugs, and I still did drugs. But I
You
also
know-
had like the
But I'd say you went
I
into
did
it
have self control.
Yeah,
and
if
I
you-
understood.
exactly.
Yep,
You went into
that's
it with
exactly.
a knowing, probably like
It was
'cause-
more of a curiosity of what is
Yeah.
this like? Like I see people do it. All right, I'm in a good setting. I don't have to do anything else tonight. I can do this without having to go home and face my family
Sure.
tonight. You know, I'm staying over at my buddy's house. I can do this and get
controlled
away with it.
environment, and everything I've ever tried, I always researched it. I mean, there's good sources on the internet. Is beneficial for so many reasons.
Sure.
It's horrible for other reasons, but one of the reasons is you can find a lot of good information on there. That
Yeah.
illegal drugs. There's a whole bunch of information you can find on.
Oh
it.
yeah.
So yeah, I'd come to research everything, and that's what made it okay for me. And you can kind of determine, okay, maybe I don't want to try that. That seems bad, or this experience seems like something I might want to try, and maybe like read through the people's experiences of trying, because there's that too.
Yeah.
You can find all sorts of information.
But to get back to your question you asked earlier, where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
I think marijuana should be legalized and probably regulated in the same way that nicotine, alcohol, drugs that are already commercially available are. Everything above that, like a schedule, is it Schedule 1 or 2 or I can't
think
remember.
Schedule
if the
1's
scale
the
goes
worst.
Okay, so yeah, the scale goes 1 being the worst. I think marijuana is like a Schedule 4.
No, it's one.
What?
Yes.
No.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
It's on the same class as fentanyl and heroin
Marijuana
and everything
is.
else. Yes.
Okay.
That'll change.
That is
again.
absolutely
It's got to
incorrect.
change.
It's going to change because
But everything else on that list should probably, I think it should be open to use medically.
Is it
Because
still
there
Schedule
are
one?
benefits that some people get from opioids. I'm not saying
Oh, yeah.
I agree with pump everybody full of opioids, but it's like, hey, we're getting rid of morphine.
Well,
no,
here's
no
the-
more, no more. Your life is ending, and here, we're going to
Sure.
dull your pain
the
down
only
type of stuff.
And the only
Right.
reason we're having a conversation like this right now is because people, let's face it, people just abuse it.
Yes.
It was meant for good. It was meant to help somebody,
yeah.
genuinely. And-
Someone with anxiety someone with anxiety that's using weed to get through that is probably going to take a small hit periodically throughout the day. You won't even know they're
they
high.
might even have.
They
their
might not
time.
even look
Yeah,
high.
It's literally just like
it's-
I'm starting to get worked up.
it just takes the little edge off for them, and they
calm
keep
myself.
going, and it probably keeps them in a better lane.
When
So-
I was in elementary school, I got prescribed Ritalin.
oh,
yeah,
God.
I was going to bring that up earlier. Yeah, ADHD stuff.
I think that should not even exist.
I would agree with you.
For especially for use in children. I don't hold anything against my mom for it. The doctors were very good at talking her into that. Obviously, didn't know all the health effects at the time because technically I shouldn't have even been able to join the military and serve in the Marine Corps.
Right.
Because they're like, this does so much damage to your liver and things like that from prolonged use over the years that it's just not good. Like you'll be disqualified. And I'm like, okay, never took anything like that.
Well, the recruiter told you, don't say that.
Yeah.
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 Don't tell them you had
Quite
asthma.
literally.
Oh, you had
It's
asthma as a
you
kid? Don't tell them that.
Did you ever take any medicines for ADHD? Yes. I'm going to ask you that again. and give me a different answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I know. There's people that have talked to who had ADHD. Sorry,
These nuts.
yeah, who had terrible side effects.
Now, do you think ADHD is a real thing, or do you think that some kids are just generally more hyper and have a hard time sitting in one place?
I don't think it's a
harder
real
than
thing.
others?
I think
Tune
it's
in for
100%
next
what you
time,
said.
folks.
I think that's a
that
great,
will be an
I
episode.
think that's what, yeah.
Mental health will be one of our episodes. 100% ADHD. I
He
think,
can't sit in this classroom for 8 hours and not move.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's 10 years old.
I think
He wants to do stuff. He's going
wants
to get a little
to-
jittery.
He's a kid. He wants to go run around with his friends at recess.
Yep.
Right.
Go
We'll
see
touch
the
it.
outside.
we'll get to this. We'll get to this
That's a
subject
good one.
eventually.
Yeah, I
That's
do
a
want
big
to talk
one.
about that a lot.
But I will just insert a little blurb here. I think that ADHD is just an easy way for it's an excuse. It's an excuse
Yep.
that parents use for misbehaving children.
It's an excuse the teachers use
And
for
I was
misbehaving.
I was
Teachers
a
too.
naughty child. I
Sure.
I had such a hard time sitting still in class. But like I said, looking back on it now, of course I can't. I was loud, so I was bouncing off the walls. If a fire truck drove by the classroom, I'm running to the window to
Oh,
watch
sure.
the fire truck go
Sure.
by, no matter what's going on.
Yeah.
but
like-
that being said, don't make me sit still for 8 hours.
Yes.
Right.
As a 10-year-old, I'm like,
Yep.
I'm developing.
You got it.
All I know is I don't like staring at a desk looking at a piece of paper.
That's
all day.
100% it.
That's all I knew as a kid. But
Yeah.
like growing up, I was a bad kid. I was in the principal's office. I'm like, why was I in the principal's office? You couldn't sit still. Like, yeah, I was a toddler, man. I
Yeah,
wanted to
makes
do
sense.
things. I was
Yep.
hyper. I wanted to have fun.
And
I'm surrounded by all my favorite people in the same place,
Yeah.
and we have to sit here and be quiet the whole time.
exactly.
Yeah, right?
Well, let's touch about
crazy.
that in the education system too, because so the education system has become such a thing where you have 30 kids to a classroom. I mean, when I was in school, I had 28 kids in my classroom at one
Probably,
time
yeah.
at any point,
Sounds
a given
about
point,
right.
and those. So you, as a kid in school, say you had a problem staying focused on something, okay? You have a lot less chance of being able to talk to those kids and see what makes them tick individually when you have 28 kids in a classroom.
That's true.
So
You're making one teacher responsible for all of them, and
Absolutely.
as long as the majority of those kids hold to the norm, they're not worried about the individual that can't.
Yep. In fact, I would argue that they're breeding them to be in a norm. And if they're not, they're tossed out
Right.
and they're put in either special education or they're told to go to another
Or you
school.
go to a remote learning school because
Or-
that's any
yeah,
better. Go look at
exactly.
a computer screen now for 8 hours.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's going to be much
Yep.
It's
easier.
going to be worse.
Yep. Yeah. So that's my thing, and again, we'll get into that. But yeah, when you have 28 kids in a classroom, and one is saying, "Hey, I don't like doing this. I don't like reading a book all day." Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's because maybe they're really good at present mathematics to them from an engineering standpoint rather than just
Right.
on a paper. You know,
Yeah.
introduce
Yeah,
these.
a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
Build the Lego tower. And it's like, all right, now these are the mathematic.
Yeah, and
measure out the blocks and do a little couple formulas
Right,
with them.
right.
And they'll be doing some advanced math and not even realize it.
Absolutely.
They're just having
Absolutely. How many people out there still think that they don't use I know a guy who was a machinist back when I was a machinist. I knew a guy who said he hated math. He absolutely hated math, despised it when he was growing up, and he to this day claims that he never uses algebra. He's a machinist. He's
Using it
literally
daily.
he's looking daily, hourly. He looks at a blueprint and there's a value missing and he's got to measure it.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, how do you figure that out? Oh, well, I figure out what the overall length of this is and then take the measurement that's there. And then I just have to figure out algebra. That's algebra, and it's so people
crazy.
people understand things. And
That's fair. And I always hated math growing up.
Yeah,
too,
me
but I
too.
do understand that I use geometry all the time at work. When
Right, right.
When I do metal fabrication in our shop.
You
It's a whole
understand-
lot of,
yeah, you
Right.
understand things in a different way. The way I understand something, the way I understand how a computer works is way different than the way you understand it.
I don't understand how it works.
Well, right, but
I press the button.
Yeah.
The screen turns on.
if it turns
and
on,
I'm going.
if it doesn't turn on, we have a
Yeah.
problem.
Then I hit it a couple times.
Yeah.
And it may or may not turn on.
yep, I think ADHD is just an easy way for a lot of teachers and a lot of parents to say, I don't know how to deal with this kid.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just an excuse. It's like a lobotomy. You're just giving them a pill form lobotomy.
Yeah.
You're just making them manageable for you, just making a little zombie for you.
Yep.
Yeah, and like you said, we're going to talk about that one
Oh,
more.
yeah.
We can do that a whole show on that alone. I mean, it's good stuff. But I mean, to wrap the point up, I think if it grows on this green earth, bud, it should be legal. I don't think any man has a point to make a product that grows in the ground illegal.
Same with heroin.
Okay.
Well, with the poppy seed situation and everything else,
Well,
you're using it for heroin.
maybe don't allow the refining to get to that point because
Right.
there are derivatives of poppy that still have the same effects, not the same effects, the pain-killing effects without going the extra level of refining.
Yeah,
it
I
down
mean,
to
they're-
like black tar heroin.
Yeah.
Exactly. They've turned. It's almost like how
It's almost
how
like you were
marijuana's
saying
gotten
about
a lot.
weed. Like
yeah,
weed's
exactly.
crazy.
It's gotten a lot
like,
more crazy.
This is good, but what if we made it super good?
exactly
Right.
To the point where you can't even avoid using
Right.
it once
And-
you use it. Because
and I am
you
a
will
little
sell
bit-
your child to get this.
I am a little bit against like them making it so much more and more and more. It's like, well, I feel like leaving it as close to its natural state is what needs to be done.
Right.
Because I just don't feel like we should be messing with
I
stuff
grew
like
up on
that.
regular weed, man. I don't need all this crazy stuff.
Well,
You used to be able to smoke weed for a little bit, and it was fine. Now it's like you take, to quote a comedian, he's like, you take one hit and go insane. Like you're just like, oh my, what is in there?
right.
I can't just smoke weed and chill out. Now it's like my heart rate just hit 200. Like what is going on, dude?
Yeah, and my thought on it too, to kind of summarize my point is, I don't think that there's anything. I like the fact that we are being able to give people who like to use it. We're giving them a healthier alternative than just trusting a guy off the streets. I do like that aspect of it, and I do like. I do like that the money that is used, that is taxed, could be used for different things. Whether or not it actually is, we
Should
could have
be.
that. It should be. Should
Yeah, if it was sold that way and produced that way and given to the voters in such a way, it needs to be held.
Yeah.
I get that.
It all comes back to
I like-
reckless government spending.
be. Yeah.
It seems to always kind of come back. To
Like I
that.
said, we're in a budget surplus this year. So you took too much money from me, is what you're saying.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
took more money than you needed.
Yeah.
Give it back.
One big con.
No,
No.
I will say one big con for me as far as legalizing marijuana. One big con for me is one, and this is just me personally. It's not necessarily a public issue for the public, but I won't necessarily become a recreational marijuana user more. Any more than I have been in the past, which we've already.
No, I think it'll be pretty few and far between for me myself.
Yeah,
I don't-
and here's the
I
reason.
drink more, and I don't even drink that much anymore.
Yeah, well-
it's pretty much my daily drinks are when I come down here.
Yeah,
And then it's like, all right, see you next week.
Right.
Maybe I'll have a beer or two at home if there's a sports game I want to watch or
Yeah,
something.
one
But
or
other than
two.
that, it's
there's a reason that I won't become a recreational user, and that is because one, my work. Work tells me that I can't have these things, which I know that a lot of workplaces have lightened up on
it
that
would
because of
probably
the
adjust.
legalizing.
It's technically I should have got drug tested to start my job. My
Yeah.
boss straight up told me, he's like, we would not be able to staff this place. if we drug tested
Right,
everybody.
right. Well,
We're
here's
fully
the
aware
other,
of what's
He's like,
going
if you
on.
have an accident, though, stand by to get drug tested.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
but it's
absolutely.
no more of the, because when I did my first construction job, as soon as I got hired, it was like, okay, we accepted it. You're hired. First day of work, go to the occupational health place and pee in a
Yep.
cup
Yep.
before
Yep.
you even start. And
Yep.
if you fail that drug test, you can't start.
Yep.
Right.
The other part of it for me too is, say, like right now with alcohol, they have a way to definitely measure what your blood alcohol level is in the form of a breathalyzer.
Yes.
Okay. So if you've smoked weed, let's say you are totally responsible about it, and let's say you smoked 3 hours ago, you didn't smoke very much, you're totally fine to drive now. Okay. All that cop has to say is, I smell the faint odor of marijuana on you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pull you out for a field sobriety test. At that point, field sobriety tests have been argued that they're in the eye of the beholder.
Look, I'm going to give you guys a quick lesson here. Refuse the sobriety test
Yeah.
immediately and say,
Well-
if you want to test me at all, you're going to have to take me to a hospital and get a blood draw.
So here's the thing.
Yeah. That's good
Ins-
advice.
Yeah, but instead of a breath, there's no there's no comparison of breathalyzer to THC. There's no roadside test that they can have. And so yeah, you say, okay, well, yeah, you have to take me to do a blood draw. But the problem is with a breathalyzer, they'll use that and they'll say, okay, yep, you're good to drive, be on your way.
Well, not even always. They might say you blow a .02 and they're like, well, you're still driving impaired.
They could.
Instead of getting a DUI, you get, what is it? Like it's a wet reckless.
Okay.
Essentially, it's a misdemeanor. It's not a felony. It's like you are below the legal limit. However, you are driving impaired.
Right. And see, like this again.
that pissed me off.
My buddy got one of those on base in California. So that was like, you got a DUI? He's like, it's not even a DUI. It's even worse. It's like okay, you beat the legal limit. Well, actually, no, he didn't. Oh no, he did because it was off base.
Right.
But if he was on base, because the tolerance on base is 0. It doesn't matter. You can't blow anything on base. So.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought behind it. Is there's no way to test me.
I wish there was
my innocence.
I think if there was, they'd rush it off Schedule 1 probably quicker, federally.
Yeah.
If there was some sort of way to like rapidly test it.
That's why I'm not necessarily I'm not saying that this is necessarily the reason that I am not pro legalizing marijuana. I just will not myself become a recreational user just because I know that those liabilities exist. They exist a little bit farther than even alcohol because there's a way to measure it in that sense.
So basically, do what you do.
Yeah,
don't mess with me.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
America.
I mean, I can see pros and cons,
right.
and
don't leave your needles for your heroin outside of my apartment or on the street.
And I know that there is a responsibility for lawmakers to make sure that the public is in general safe. Okay, I get that. But at the same time when we're talking about something like this that people are already using recreationally and they're not dying in huge numbers over it
and going to prison for long periods of time over it.
It's not necessarily something that.
Do you think it has something to do with how powerful the tavern leagues are in Wisconsin?
I don't
want people to switch to alcohol or to marijuana.
Right.
We got all these bars.
I have heard that rumor. I enjoy that one. Yes,
Joey's giving us the.
We're getting the sign. So, anyways, I think that
drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad. Okay.
I'm not going to advocate for anyone individually to do any drug at all.
Be your own advocate.
Be your own advocate. Do what's right for you. Research. The only advice I would give is research anything new that you haven't done before. I honestly am on that fence of. If you can do it responsibly, do it, man. If you can make it a thing, do it. It doesn't affect me or mine, and it shouldn't. So, do you.
Yeah.
I got to say I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that's a very libertarian take anyways, is as long as what you're doing doesn't affect me and mine, do it. But the second it doesn't,
right?
It's like your freedom of, it's like your right to swing your fist ends at my face.
Yeah,
Right?
true. Right. Yep. Okay.
So yeah, I mean,
well, not necessarily. It was a good topic. I think there wasn't a lot of disagreement, but it's a good topic. There's definitely a lot of different views came up on it.
I think this is a topic that's hard to refute.
Yeah.
It's like, should we legalize marijuana? It's like, I think we all know the answer by now is yes.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just kind of like, we can take the straw man, or not the straw man.
The devil's advocate.
Devil's advocate.
Yeah. And I tried. You could kind of look at the crime and everything else, but all these things don't really make a lot of sense.
But those crimes wouldn't exist if it weren't for marijuana being illegal.
Right.
It's like,
so that's where it's like, well, okay.
The ends have created the means.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and what are we drinking on tonight, Zach?
We're drinking Victoria. This is actually the first time. I think it's the first time I've had it. Victoria.
First time I've had it too.
Made in Mexico. Oh,
it's a
okay.
weird name for a Mexican beer.
Yeah.
Like I said, he pulled out the Victoria case, and I'm like, was that like a Canadian beer or something?
Yeah.
Definitely
I
seems
That
like
would be
something
my
that would be.
right. I'm like, Victoria. That sounds Canadian.
Canadian, yeah. I
Yeah,
can
even
see that, absolutely.
even the label on it doesn't really necessarily scream Mexico.
It sure doesn't. It actually looks more Canadian than not.
It does, but it's good.
But it says Mexico right there on the bottle. Hecho en Mexico. So
Cerveceria Modelo Mexico. What is it? A Modelo?
Modelo
Like
Nava.
Modelo made, or
Crown Imports.
Does Modelo
Chicago,
make something?
I think Crown Imports also does Modelo and
Oh, okay.
what's the other one? Corona,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this is good. It's just kind of one of your base lager
It's
beers.
a good, it's a good base. There's no weird aftertaste or anything.
No.
I'd call it a pretty damn good solid
It's
beer.
solid. It's
I'm
solid.
not feeling terrific today, and I still drank that beer.
Yeah,
There you go.
there we go.
It's-
All right,
It was easy drinking. I feel hydrated now.
yeah. There you go.
All right, well, Zach,
So-
take us out.
All right. Well, again, if you guys have any comments or anything, feel free to use that Q&A section. We in the future we'll get it a little bit more personalized to each episode, but in the meantime, all of those things come right to us. So if you guys have any criticisms or thoughts on new episodes, definitely let us know in that section, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. You guys have a great one.
Yep.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
Coltin.
being on. Thank you for being on.